Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Doug. Very, very nice. So I think you covered it all.
There we go.
No. Let's all take a nice deep breath. Clear our throats. Okay. If you got hearing aids, I want you to adjust them. If you got a pacemaker, I want you to get it in balance. If you got any other electrical devices that might be coordinating within our electronics, let's bring it all into harmony and peace and joy and know that it's all working together, whatever it may be. I'm not sure what it is. We were looking and testing it this morning. We were picking up a radio signal. There was a radio station coming in from someplace. And you know, there are some radio stations that have license that on certain days and hours, like on the weekends, they get to boost up their signals. So perhaps it's that, or perhaps somebody's got a short wave, or perhaps we got a broken wire. Or Virginia. Virginia's the wicked one. You know, when I first arrived here, someone that reminds me, someone had told me, because Reverend John Blaney was the minister at the time that this building was created, and people have said for years afterwards that John is still wandering around in the attic or someplace. So maybe it's John. So, but it's all going to be good. It's all going to be well balanced and perfect here. So I'll try not to move too much just in case it's me. When I read the passage today, and I agree with Reverend Doug, this is one of the most rich chapters in the entire book. This idea about consciousness, about the objective and the subjective and the mind and the oneness, and how we all come together in this, and how we play out through our individualized experiences. When I wrote down what I thought was going to be the title of my talk today, it's something like the diversity and the multiplicity, but not the divisiveness. Because when we begin to speak about duality, there comes up in the mind of many people a divisiveness. In order for there to be a duality, people begin to think that there has to be this sense of extreme opposites. That there must be a good in the universe, and if there's a good in the universe, then there must be an evil in the universe. And so we have this idea of duality. And then we go out and we start looking for the evidence. We all like to play independent investigators. We all like to be our own little private detective. And so we go out and we start finding the evidence to prove what we are creating in our mind. So we have this idea that there's good and evil. So we look for some good, and then we run out and we try to find as much evil as we can to say, see, there's the evil. You know, it's kind of like, you know, that was my first husband, or my first wife, or maybe that was my parents, or maybe it was my first boss, or, you know, someplace we have to identify so that we can stand over in our place of righteousness. Because don't we all want to be right? Yeah. Well, there we are again, duality. There's right and there's wrong. And then we have to go out and we have to find more evidence to prove that. Our entire life seems to be about creating all of the evidence about the duality. And yet, Ernest Holmes comes back to this point that he makes time and time again. And Ernest was not the first one. This has been all the teachers, all of the faiths, all of the traditions, through all time, that comes back to that point that says we are all one. Now wrap your mind around that one. How can we talk about oneness and then shift into duality and then start looking for all of the evidence about, what's one side or the other, and can we find some common ground? And everywhere we go, we do this in our politics. We do this in our careers. We do this in our relationships. We do this in our religions. We do this day in and day out, creating the duality, more and more duality, until we have simply forgotten the oneness. In that opening song that Paul sings so beautifully, should I forget, will you remember for me? When we forget our oneness, that's when we move into this place of duality, and we begin to see the multiplicity, and we begin to see it in a way that looks like divisiveness. That idea that the only way that I can have my good is if I get it before you, above you, beyond you, greater than you, or anybody else, that I must have mine first, and then if there's anything left, well, maybe that's where I'll share. And we've created a huge divisiveness between ourselves and the rest of life, and we have forgotten the message of truth, the message of reality, the message of oneness. There is only one life, and this life is perfect, and this life is God's life, and this life is my life now. I ask you to repeat that and say it every week, because I want you to remember this. In the midst of chaos, in the midst of divisiveness, in the midst of seeing all of the duality that shows up in the world, I want you to remember first and foremost the oneness, the one life, the one mind. It is true, to the best of my knowledge, from all that I have read, from all that I have heard, from all that I have experienced, that when we come into this form that we call physical life, that there is a duality. It's very apparent to me. When I look out into the world, I see multiple levels of duality. On the big level, there's male and female. There's the duality. Oneness, we're all human beings. So there's no divisiveness in that except for what we choose to create in that level. And boy, do we create. We have created all kinds of laws and regulations and borders and nations and countries and religions and institutions based upon this divisiveness of simply male and female. How could we possibly have two individuals of the same gender sharing and raising children? It seems like an oxymoron to the majority of the world. They just don't get it because they can't see the oneness in it. So they had to create laws. They had to create, division. They had to create religion. They had to create separation from it. And when we do that, we start finding places in our evidence where we can make the other person wrong in order to have our righteousness. How wonderful if we could find a place where we could be in the oneness and yet be able to look out and see the multiplicity. So when I look out here, I'm looking around and I'm seeing a great vast of multiplicity sitting before me. And the oneness is